Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I am one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 4, Episode 1 and 2, The Way of the Warrior. But before we continue, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us. And if you haven't, you're missing out because we actually have a contest going on right now. And that's the first thing I want to tell you all about. And it's the easiest thing in the world. All you have to do is listen to this episode and tell us something about this episode that you liked or disliked. Being polite, of course. And once we get enough people who've commented and so forth, we're going to throw all your little usernames into a hat or something. We're going to draw one out. We'll reach out to you, and then we will send you your own completely free The Fire Caves mug. Okay. So that's all you have to do. It's really simple. It costs you nothing but an hour or so of your time listening to our dulcet tones talk about our favorite show. Now, another part of housekeeping before we continue, I did say that this was going to be kind of a reunion of sorts. We were supposed to have some guests with us from another great podcast that we have here on our fabulous, ever growing network from the Expanse, the Deep Space, not the Deep Space Nine, but the Enterprise podcast. But unfortunately, due to prior engagements, those guests could not join us tonight for this episode. And as sad as I am about that, I'm also kind of excited because that means I get to talk more about my favorite episode of Deep Space Nine. And that is saying something because there's so many great episodes in this show. But finally, we're getting to them. And season 4 kicks it off with a bang.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
strap in because there's a lot to talk about. We're going to keep some of the traditional things we do very brief so we can get to all the stuff in this amazing two-parter. But first, before we do that, David, how has your week been?
That's been good. Work as I think I said last week, up and down. It just is what it is right now.
That's your
Um,
phrase, man. Your go-to.
Well, I mean, it really is that right now. I was actually talking with the guy who's my manager right above me, and he was saying it's been his experience. Some good days, some not. Where it's just dead. And then today was busy, good busy. Um, yeah. So it's been good. It's been great. Gives me a chance to read and play. So I don't know if anyone ever played Metroid Prime way back in the day, but Metroid Prime Remastered came out about a month ago, and I got a copy of it. It was one of my favorite games as a kid, and the remake is great. It's just they just redid the textures and upgraded the controls a little bit, and man, it's a blast. So anyway, doing that at work, just killing time, and yeah. How about you? How's life?
I mean, I've just been trying my best to keep busy with some other things. Last week, when we were doing this, I did tell people, I'd hurt myself once again, and I did go to the doctor finally and get checked out. I am fine. Severely strained my lower back muscles, and
Mm.
so that was what was causing me the continued pain. And it's basically, like I said, I just need to remember that I can't just jump right into things. I need to actually do more in the way of stretching, which I know from my own personal history, I'm the worst when it comes to stretching before physical activity. I hate doing it. It's just like, why am I working out to work out? Like that was always my mentality, and now I'm certainly paying for it because I've had numerous injuries or sprains, strains, whatever it is, and it all stems from the fact that I just don't do enough to warm up. So now I've learned a very painful, very intense lesson, and I will be slowly, well, not too slowly, because it wasn't totally incapacitating. But now I'm just taking my time more, doing more stretches and things like that. Still a little stiff with some things, but it's getting better, and hopefully I can continue on this pace and really make some better strides here. But other than that, it's been pretty steady, pretty quiet here. So, and I want to keep it that way because the moment I start complaining about it being too boring or whatever, something terrible happens, and now I'm just like, I kind of wish those boring days were back.
Yeah,
But no, all good stuff, and
right,
hoping to make more good things happen here in the future.
right.
Um,
Speaking of which, tomorrow night, John Wick, John Wick 4.
Yes, yes. David and I will be going to John Wick 4. It just came out yesterday. It
Mhm,
finally came out. Supposedly final installment in the John Wick saga,
mhm,
and I'm excited to see it. I'd heard about the movies when they came out, originally and whatever, but I did not watch him right around that time. Like I think I waited a while before I finally got into him. And I think the premise of the movies was kind of silly to me when I first heard about him.
right.
But once I watched them, I was just like, man, they're so action packed. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
I love that. I'm not saying that, it has the most complex storyline ever, you know,
Yeah,
but
high table.
that's yeah,
Yeah.
that's not why I'm watching it. I wasn't looking for some kind of Cannes Film Festival noir-esque, story. I was just looking for a great
Casablanca 2.0. I mean, they
yeah,
went to
yeah,
Casablanca in the last one.
right.
Speaking of which, I did watch the second one and third one this week. Forgot to mention that. And quick
Of
criticism
John
from
Wick.
yeah, I
Yeah.
rewatched them. I've already watched the first one a time or two, so I didn't rewatch that one. But I was rewatching the third one, and I was like, man, the action in the third one felt the most stilted, in my opinion. It felt
Hmm.
the most like there were more people that he's fighting who just suck at fighting, who just take a hit and then like pause and wait for him to hit them again. It's like the choreography wasn't as good in the third one. It was fine in the second one. I was disappointed.
I wonder how much of that is the changing state of action that they can do in Hollywood these days, on top of actors getting older. And, also some of the actors who are doing some of the stunts are pretty famous for their looks, and you don't want to potentially risk
Right,
ruining that. Like,
right,
correct me if I'm wrong, Halle Berry's in the third one,
yes,
and you certainly don't want to mess up what she's got going on,
right,
at all. So I could understand why some things may have seemed a little bit more telegraphed in regards to that, especially when they do some of those close-up face fight scenes.
yeah.
You don't want to make a mistake there and put out an eye or scar
Yeah, no,
somebody's
I
face.
definitely
And
get that, but I felt like, I mean, again, I didn't only rewatch the second and third ones in preparation for us going to see the fourth one, but like in the second one, it feels like there's a whole sequence where he's prepared for the big fight scene he's in. So like he has
mhm,
guns hidden away, and so he's able to prepare.
yeah,
And then like he's being chased by assassins, but they're only like one at a time. But in the fourth one, he's just going through waves and waves. And then in the final fight scene, he fights two guys, and then he fights two more guys, and then he fights the final guy. And again, it's a lot of fun action, like as you said,
yeah.
but it did feel like in certain scenes, like it was the choreography was just coming out more than it had in the second one. It looked more choreographed, and I was like, man, it's a bummer because it looks faker in this
Oh
one.
yeah.
But
I've been running
the
into that a little bit, or a little bit, yeah, with some other shows that I was watching, some TV shows. Couldn't help but notice it was like, man, these fight scenes just look like they're just it's so obvious. It's like, what happened to you guys? This show did not used to be this way. Why are you all? And that's why I was wondering if maybe there's been a change in how things are filmed, because I feel like I see that a lot now on so-called action shows. A lot of their action seems to have been dumbed down a bit, and there's a lot of pausing and holding, and you can tell where things were kind of cut and edited and it didn't quite match up, but like all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, oh yeah, it's clear there's been a change for sure in
right,
how action is done.
right. I did want to quickly mention as a part of the whole John Wick stuff is that the actor Lance Reddick recently died.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, apparently I don't. I
He
think he was
died of
found at
natural
home.
causes.
Yeah, just at
He died
home.
of natural causes. He was
Yeah,
60,
I think
60,
he's just 60.
61.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, still you know in good shape, in good, there's nothing again, they said died of natural causes, so there doesn't seem to be anything that was, out there that would have he wasn't like sick or battling some illness in silence or something like that. He
right.
just yeah, he just was at home and then he was gone, so very sad, very shocking to hear.
Yeah,
And yeah, definitely condolences to his family and close people that were to him and everything else. But
yeah.
yeah, very shocking to know that he is not here. And he was a apparently he was a very big Star Trek fan. Um, in fact, he and LeVar Burton were actually quite friendly, and he visited the set of Star Trek a few times, just being a fan and using his star power to get on the get on the set. So hey,
Nice.
like again, if you can, why wouldn't you? If you're a
Exactly.
fan, if you're a fan and you have the clout to do that, to be on your favorite thing, why wouldn't you? Of course
Right.
you would.
Right.
And
Right.
and he did. So there.
Right.
Um, but yeah, again, very sad. I don't know who they could. I mean, there's not going to be anybody to replace him. Obviously, and I don't think they really need to. I think the movie was finished before he passed. So if he's in,
Yes.
and I don't know if he's in the fourth one, but I think that he is. And
My
so yes,
understanding is
yeah.
he is. Yeah.
So I think that might. I think this actually might have been one of the final things that he filmed
Yeah.
before he passed. So
Yeah, it's one of those things like he just died like a week ago and the movie came out just a few days ago. Like I don't know if they had time to like fit in a little thing, a little blurb, like,
oh, I'm
in
sure they did.
remembrance.
I'm sure they did. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised at all if there was a quick update. I mean, it's not like it's like legit film
Yeah.
anymore.
True, true. Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I just mean like
I'm sure.
I mean, I guess in the modern era they can just digitally send the movie to the movie theaters. They're not sending physical copies anymore, so it'd be very
Yeah.
easy to do that. But yeah.
Yeah, to just update the file and then resend it out and just be like, here, this is yeah. I don't think that would have been hard at all. I would be surprised if we didn't see something that said, in memory of or special thanks to or something that acknowledged his passing. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised at all. Yeah, again, I would be more surprised if we didn't see something like that
Yeah.
for
Exactly.
him. So, last bit of other news before we dive into this great episode because I don't think I can wait too much longer. Um, Star Trek Picard is once again doing great things. The fifth episode aired just this past week, and that means we are now halfway through the final season of this show. So, and again, it's great. There were so many great moments in this episode. I'm not going to give you any spoilers whatsoever. Just that again, phenomenal show. If it doesn't spawn spin-offs, I will be highly surprised because they've set so many people up, both OG characters and new ones. They've set so many of them up for great side tales that it just doesn't make sense to not use them.
Right.
There was, in my opinion, a Battlestar Galactica reference in this most recent episode, and it was about ships being non-networked, which if you remember in Battlestar Galactica, that's the reason that the Battlestar Galactica survived the initial attack of the Cylons because it was a non-network ship. And so when the Cylons sent out their initial computer attack, the Galactica did not succumb to said attack.
Right.
And so now in this particular episode, though they didn't do anything with it yet, that's the only thing I'll say, they did make a point of mentioning all of these ships are non-networked. So that's why they are special. And I was like, non-network ships suddenly happen to be potentially the saviors of humanity. Where have I heard this before? Where have I heard this before?
Looks like the
So,
references have come full circle.
hmm all of this has happened before and will happen again, eh? Gotcha. I see what you did there.
Uh,
So, and I was cracking up. I'm like, oh, you had Admiral Kane last week. Now you got the non-network ships this week. Stop it with your reboots, all
Get
right?
some Starbuck in there from
Oh
she's
my,
on the
yes.
Mandalorian right now. What's her face? But yeah,
Katie Sackhoff, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But again, great episode. Callback to so many different characters. Very nostalgic, but in such a great way. Even a Wrath of Khan Easter egg in
Ooh.
the movie, and we got a brief cameo by the Genesis device, and I was so happy when I saw it. I don't even know why. I was just like, what weapon of mass destruction is back there? It's the Genesis device. Oh, yeah. Instant flashback to a great movie. Just great stuff. So, but we are not here to talk about those things.
Nope.
We're here to talk about Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And would you like to give the
No,
recap?
you do it. Go do it.
Okay.
You want to do it. I know you
I
want to
know.
do it.
Well, I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can because there's so many other things we want to talk about. But this episode starts off right in the thick of the action, right? We see Cisco and Kira barreling down a corridor, and everybody's pepper spraying the various rooms and corridors and everything else with phaser fire because we're searching for a changeling, right? There's a changeling loose on the station, and they've got to narrow him down. And so they're doing these wide beam sweeps and everything else. Cisco and Kira end up finding him, and he makes a break for it and ends up on the promenade where it's revealed that it's Odo, and they were doing a drill, and Odo, of course, kills, quote unquote, kills the good doctor. Why is it always Bashir? We'll get to that, but yeah, it always seems to be Bashir gets caught up by these changes. Remember on on the Defiant, a few episodes back of the adversary, he was the one that the changeling went after too. So
Yeah.
the doctor sucks, or he's got a weird smell about him. I don't know. Um, so yeah, it's revealed that they're doing these drills, trying to prepare for in the event that the Dominion comes streaming through the wormhole, and trying to see how much damage they can cause. Um, Cisco then, calls off the drills. Everybody goes their separate ways. We see Cisco in his quarters. He's having dinner with Cassidy. He has shaved his head. He is now bald, goatee sporting Captain Cisco, the way that he should have been forever. And him and Cassidy are about to enjoy a nice intimate dinner with each other when Dax calls, tells him to get up to ops. He does, where they are greeted by the Klingon flagship, the Negvar, which is being commanded by General Martok, one of my favorite Klingons. Martok then, requests to come on the station. They agree to let their people on, and all of a sudden, all these other Klingon ships start decloaking everywhere. They're surrounded by Klingon ships. And Martok then has a meeting with Cisco and Kira. They do the blood test, slicing each other's hands to make sure that they're actually who they say they are, not changelings in disguise. And basically, he's saying that the Klingons have come to set up shop, and they're here to fight alongside the Federation in the event, again, the Dominion comes streaming through the wormhole. Cisco at first is appreciative, but he's a little skeptical, and then they start running into some other issues with the Klingons on board the station. They are, interrogating people on the promenade. They stop a ship, Cassidy's ship of all ships, and stop her because they were going to try and search her vehicle. Cisco puts a stop to that, of course, but unfortunately, the captain of that vehicle that tried to stop Cassidy was murdered by Martok. Cisco,
Executed, to be fair.
yes, for dereliction of duty because he was supposed to stop and search that ship. And even though Cisco made him not do that, he was blamed for it. So he was killed.
Right.
Cisco realizes that whatever's going on with the Klingons, they're not telling the whole story, and it's going to come to a head really soon. So he says, as Curzon once said, the only people who can really deal with Klingons are the Klingons. And so he gets in touch with Starfleet Command, and they send him our resident Klingon, none other than Lieutenant Commander Worf, fresh off of an extended leave at the monastery of Boreth, where he had been deep in religious study following the destruction of the Enterprise. He tells Cisco that he wasn't really sure what he was going to be doing with himself afterwards, whether he was going to go back to the monastery or not. He was considering resigning from Starfleet, but until he made his decision, he was going to do his duty, which now Cisco has charged him with finding out the real reason the Klingons are here. He starts trying to contact people and everything else, but that doesn't go very well. He has a confrontation with Martok's son, which leads to a confrontation with Martok, which was great. And again, we're going to talk about that later. Um, Finally, he doesn't get any answers from anybody. He finally finds an old Klingon who owes his family a debt. They drink, they sing some Klingon songs, they headbutt each other, and then Worf is told the real reason that they're there. It's actually an invasion of Cardassia. Klingon intelligence has basically told them about the political upheaval on the Cardassian planet, and they believe that if there's going to be anyone who's infiltrated by the founders, it'll be Cardassia. So they want to go there and control the planet before that happens, which, of course, for Klingons, control means brutal subjugation. So Cisco's like, well, we're not going to let you just do that, of course. And unless you have like definitive proof, no.
Yeah.
And Martok and company is like, screw you. We're going to do whatever we want because we're Klingons. That's what we do.
Right.
And they get into a little bit of an argument, but then he's like, I'll talk to Gowron, who's our, the chancellor, and he leaves. He doesn't really talk to Gowron. He just launches the fight early,
Right.
and Cisco decides that he is going to find a way to surreptitiously get a message to the Cardassians in order to alert them of the incoming Klingon fleet.
Because
This
the
kind of puts
Klingons are the allies of the Federation, therefore they can't warn anyone
yes.
that the Klingons are coming, because that would be a betrayal of their alliance. Yada yada yada. Keep going. Sorry.
So this is no, it's fine. So of course they use Garrick, our plain and simple tailor, to relay this message, which he does. Ducat is just as surprised as anyone else, but he accepts the message and he accepts the potential help. Cisco agrees to take the Defiant to go and rendezvous with Ducat to rescue the members of the Detapa Council. That's the name of the Cardassian civilian government at the time. And they do. They go off on the Defiant. They use the cloaking device, which freaks Worf out, but they get there anyway, and they do finally decloak and open fire on Klingon ships in order to save the Cardassians. They beam the Cardassians on board. They give them blood screenings. Ducat complains rather than says thank you, and they hightail it back to Deep Space Nine with the Klingons in tow. They make it back to the station only to find that not only have the Klingons followed them, but there's another even larger wave of Klingon ships waiting at the space station for them. This one with Chancellor Gowron himself on board. And Gowron demands that they turn over the Cardassians to them. Cisco, of course, says, no, you're not getting them, which pisses him off. Gowron does his eye glaze, that he does, and then opens fire. Everybody starts shooting at everyone else. The station is far more powerful than anybody believed because I was watching it and those phasers were cutting down those ships like nobody's business.
Yep.
Unfortunately, they were just, really outnumbered. Eventually, the shields fail. Klingons beam on board the station. Hand-to-hand combat ensues. Worf is amazing again. Jadzia is beating people up as well, and O'Brien must suffer. He gets knocked down, eye cut. Kira gets stabbed. It was awful, but it was also awesome. Great battle scene. Things eventually get contained. Gowron tries to threaten them, but Federation starships are on the way. So they're basically like, y'all need to get out of here because if you don't, you'll be fighting a war on two fronts. They quote Kahless a little bit, and then eventually Gowron decides to bug out. Now, I did forget the part where Gowron offered Worf a spot to come with them, but
Right.
Worf refused. He
Right.
said that, honor wouldn't allow him to do so, whatever. And
Yeah.
now he has now made an enemy of Gowron because he refused to side with him in battle.
Right.
And as Gowron says, this is something that they cannot forgive or
Or
forget,
forget. Yeah, I love that
with the
idea.
eyes.
And the other thing
Ah,
too, to be very clear, is that Worf believes that Gowron and the Klingons want to return to the old ways of conquering. And so when they decide to invade Cardassia and the Federation warns them not to, they terminate all alliances with the Federation.
yes.
So the
The
Klingon
Khitomer
Federation
Accords are
are
no more.
done.
Are
Even
no
though
more.
Curzon Dax was a respected name, that alliance, as negotiated by Curzon, is over, which was a huge development, obviously. So yeah, where's Picard
So
when
a
you
lot
need
of,
him?
all right. So now a little bit of Trek history before we get into anything else. The Khitomer Accords were actually one of the last acts, were one of the last things established by James T. Kirk and his crew of the Enterprise A before they all went into retirement. Um, and that's actually the feature of the last Star Trek movie, which featured them. The movie was called The Undiscovered Country. It was the sixth Star Trek movie ever produced, and there was this whole conspiracy because in the movie, the Klingon civilization, right, because of the destruction of one of their primary mining moons, could no longer afford the military campaigns that they had been doing for generations. And they were now looking at potentially becoming refugees because their planet was facing a cataclysmic event. So there was a need to establish this peace treaty with the Federation in order to find them places to live and continue to thrive as a culture. And on the one side, there are people who were like, yeah, let's help them. That's what we're supposed to do. On the other side, they were like, this is an aggressive, hostile species. The thing to do right now is crush them and bring them under our control. And so the conspiracy was to frame Kirk and McCoy for the murder of the then Klingon Chancellor Gorkon, and they had to uncover that plot, which they did. And the last thing that they did was to honor Gorkon's memory, and so the new chancellor then ratified the Khitomer Accords, which became the basis of peace and the alliance of the Federation for the next 100 and something years. And then all of a sudden, we have this conflict, and Gowron cuts it,
Yeah.
ends it.
Yeah.
So there's your Trek backstory, your Trek history for you
Yeah.
in this movie. A nice little callback there to actually a really great movie, especially considering it was the older cast and they were definitely feeling their age in it. But yeah, if you want to watch it, and I mean, you don't really have to know anything about the other movies other than to know that it's the OG crew. But it's a solid movie, nice action movie for them too. So
Okay.
good send off.
Gotcha. That's the one right before Generations. Yeah.
Yes, it is the movie before Generations.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, um, what did you think of this two-parter episode? I always have to ask you that first.
Yeah. Well, it had everything in the text message I sent you after I'd watched it. It has action. It was humorous, and unfortunately, problem with humor is sometimes it's hard to remember exactly what was humorous. So hopefully, we can remember the jokes and why they were
Oh,
funny.
yes.
Yeah. It's humorous. It's action packed, and I'm action packed in all the ways that I've wanted to see. Like not only is it Defiant in the fighting here, but the
Oh, yeah.
station finally was in a fight. This is a
Mhm.
space station. It's never been having to defend itself. And O'Brien is all like, I never got a chance to test the systems. It could all fail. We could be blowing ourselves up. And it works. Of course it works.
Of course it does, O'Brien.
Exactly. Yeah, it has a lot. And we'll talk about it more, but I'll just say it now. The thing that Star Trek has done, the most successful thing it's done, I would say, more than anything else, is make me like and understand Klingons. I never thought I would understand Klingons or appreciate them, and I do. They are a fascinating species that this show has created, and they are
I'm
both
so glad you
baffling.
said that. I'm
They're
so glad you said that.
they are both baffling and fascinating. They are both lovable and just and baffling. I'll just say it again. They are baffling, but they're just fast. All the words like I'll sort of
No,
repeat
I
myself,
I
but
I
yeah,
completely understand what you're talking about because that's how I felt about the Ferengi. I've hated the Ferengi for forever, but Quark made me love the Ferengi a
yeah,
little bit. Well, I won't say love. I appreciate them more because of Quark and Nog and Rom,
yeah.
even Moogie. But that's it. That's kind of like the extent. I don't really like. Yeah, you get to know them a bit more.
The Grand Nagus doesn't do anything for you.
He grows on you too, like mold coming
Wallace
out of his
Shawn.
ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do a great job of bringing some of these characters and the civilizations they represent, giving them more depth,
Yes.
um absolutely. I think that the Klingons really come alive in Deep Space Nine in a way that we really hadn't seen before in both the original series and Next Generation, which is funny considering that Klingons have been a part of Star Trek since the beginning. They were the first enemies, really, of Captain Kirk and crew. I mean, and now again, they've established some of the best aliens that we've had. The Romulans got their first start in the original series. Klingons did, whatever. But then, Next Generation comes along and really kind of breathed a lot of life into some of these as well, like especially the Romulans. I would say the Romulans and the Borg were probably the biggest threats in Next Generation.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then with Deep Space Nine, it's this weird kind of alignment of Cardassians, um, Klingons, and then the Dominion, what they do throughout the show.
Right.
But yeah, you definitely get more depth of character and understanding of them as a people in Deep Space Nine than you do anywhere else. And it starts here. It starts with this
Right.
episode.
Yeah. Yeah. The Klingons. I mean, obviously, it's the original series, so I'm just going on TNG
Hmm.
here and all that. But yeah, the idea of this warrior culture and like that's what they are to the point of like being just needlessly aggressive or even like part of me will say like that seems ridiculous, seems silly, but they've worked really hard to like make this culture work. It's a highly honorific society.
Hmm.
Honorific is the right word. It's an honor based
No, it is.
society.
Yeah, honor-based culture, honor-based
Yeah,
society. Absolutely.
and they basically the way they work is they are just always bold, and they commit fully to whatever it is they're doing, which is
Yeah.
usually some sort of aggression. But aggression meets aggression. It's not that the reason it works is because they match each other. It's you
Yeah.
know it's you confront someone and you dare them to do something, and they stand right up and they say, "I dare you," right back, and they stare each other down, and then society moves on, and that's
It's
they're
like I've always thought of it as, we hear so much about Klingon honor and the honor code, but I always feel like for them, the honor code is a bit of a moving target, right?
okay,
Every Klingon seems to have their own very personal interpretation of the honor code. There are greater rules that they all sort of fall under, but whatever that thing is that this particular Klingon has decided to be their central point of their personality, of their being.
right,
That is where their honor lies, and that's the aggression. They attack that aggressively. If you stand in the way of whatever that central focus is of theirs, that's where their aggression comes from. At least
right,
in the Klingons that we see that are particularly highlighted, that have a central focus. Martok, Gowron, Worf. When we see them, they all have their own like particular thing that that they're driven by, and they kind
right,
of gather others around them to follow in step, you
right,
know. And that's why, when we see Worf at odds with Gowron in this episode, you're just like you can feel that tension. Like you said, these two pillars here are against each other, and you can see the desire even in Worf to initially he wants to join, but his particular honor code is about his word, his
right,
promise, what that's what he stands for. He does not break his word. He does not, go back on an agreement or anything like that. And he's not going to do so now, despite whatever desire personally he may have
right,
to join. And that's what he's struggling with in this episode. He's struggling to find acceptance, to find a place. And here's this person who is offering him one with his
right,
people, and he
right,
can't do it. It
right.
was great scene.
Yeah, yeah. You have to wonder how much he says in this episode that his son is Alexander, right? Alexander
Alexander's his son.
likes being on Earth with his Earth parents. At least it's more stable there, I guess. So I wonder how much of his decision was based simply on that. Like I'd be abandoning my son on some level to and my family on Earth. But yeah, yeah, Worf is a good addition so far. I mean, he's always a great character, but you can tell this is much more personal than ever before.
I again, I'm going to agree with you. I felt like the moment that he came on, and we were like, and I remember the first time watching this episode, and him coming on and kind of meeting everybody and getting to work. I felt like he was a better fit here on Deep Space Nine than he was on Next Generation. And as much as I loved him on Next Generation, I feel like he spent the majority of his career being told no by Captain Picard. He was always making suggestions. He was always trying to like protect and whatever else. And
Yes,
Picard was
you're
always
right.
like, "No, we're not going to do
Yeah,
that. No,
yeah.
we're not going.
The
No, no."
the
And it's just like,
the vision of Worf groaning and grunting and sighing behind Picard as he's like, "Well, we could fire phasers or
right.
something."
Oh, one of my favorite episodes that highlights this is I don't know if you remember, but it's a Next Generation episode, and I want to call it Space Baby because that's what I remember the most, and it's where that big worm looking thing they find it in a field of asteroids, right? And it's this giant one, and it lives in space and it floats towards the Enterprise at first, and then Worf's like, it's generating some kind of weird energy. Maybe we should put up shields. And Picard's like, no, don't do that. We don't want to seem hostile. And then as soon as the thing gets close enough, it shoots the Enterprise. And then Picard's like, maybe, yeah, go ahead, put up the shields, go ahead. And Worf's just like, and and does it, you know. And I was just like, the man, that was his whole job. And then it was just like, no. And then there was another time where in the same episode, where it was like, yeah, let's fire at it, a warning shot or whatever. Because like, no, don't want to do that either. And the thing gets close, and then it shoots him again. He's like, okay, one tiny warning shot, just one. It's like all day you're just telling this man no. Like, just say yes once, just
Worf,
once.
do what you have to.
Right. Just give the man free reign.
Yeah.
You know, and I was just like, man, I wonder how many people were like shaking out of bed because Picard just wanted to get a little bit closer and didn't want to put up shields. It's
Yeah.
like, come on, you know. So yeah, he spent his whole career on the Enterprise being told no or don't act too hostile or whatever. And then here on Deep Space Nine, he's not even on the station a full hour, and Cisco's like, okay, go to work, do what you gotta do. I don't care, just give me some answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Worf. This is definitely a personal episode for Worf. Part of, I mean, a lot of what the plot is first off, is he going to resign from Starfleet and go live among the Klingons? Be among his people. I did think that when Cisco, like, he says, "I'm thinking of resigning," and then as he's leaving Cisco's office, Cisco's like, "Mr. Worf," and he basically tells him like, "Don't regret your decision. Like, I think you'd be wrong to quit Starfleet."
Oh yes.
And in that moment, I'm
Don't
like,
don't waste good, man. That was the first thought that I had when he said it.
"It
We
was
don't
what?"
waste we don't waste good, man.
Oh, well, I
This is
just
because
felt like you don't know him well enough to like give him advice. That was my first thought. Like, Cisco, you just met him. Don't be telling him how to live his life just yet. Like at the end of the episode when he says, um, they're talking, and Worf is preparing to go off and like go to some distant alliance and work as an officer
the
for some other.
The
Yeah.
Nyberite Alliance.
And Cisco has a great line. He says, I thought that leaving Starfleet, wrapping my pain and my grief over my wife's death, wrapping it in my uniform and
Uniform.
trying to toss it all away, I thought that might get rid of my pain. And I realized that was wrong. And I've never regretted staying with Starfleet. And I'm like,
Yes.
great. It was a great line, great moment. But I was like, dude, just I have to remind you that not everyone has your experience. It might be right for Worf to move on. I mean, just for who
Yeah.
Worf is, don't don't put your life on someone else, basically. So I was a little like, hey, Cisco, hold up on the
Well,
advice for a second.
Well, I agreed with what Cisco said, and I felt like he had a good beat on understanding Worf because I mean we have to remember too that there's a suspension of belief here, and we have to recognize that they've now been working together for several days, probably about a week or so, that they've been
Yes.
working closely with each other and
Yes.
dealing with things, and plus they were just attacked and fought a battle together and everything else. And Worf tells him when he first comes onto the station, that he definitely felt that he was at a crossroads. He felt like he had kind of lost his purpose, lost his family a bit with the Enterprise, and he was just kind of cast adrift out here and
Right.
didn't really know what he was going to do next. That's why he was at the monastery
Right.
studying. He was looking for direction. And in that moment, I kind of realized there's a bit of a parallel between Cisco when he first came on the station and Worf when he's first coming on. Not on the same exact personal level, but again, remember when we first meet Cisco, he was very much a man he was suffering. He lost his wife, and he was struggling with his family. He
Hmm.
again cast adrift and was trying to find something
Right.
to move past this state of grief. And I
Right.
think that's why I related, what he was telling Worf at the end of the episode about, yeah, I've been where you are. I've had that same kind of struggle, and I know that, you know, this was an aspect of my life that gave me a lot of fulfillment and meaning. And I didn't want to suddenly throw it away because I was still caught up in my hurt.
Right.
And that's how I was taking what he was telling Worf. He was like, you're a great officer. You've been in Starfleet for a long time. There's a lot of reward here.
Hmm.
Don't throw it away on a whim. Like, just make
Yes.
sure, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I read his advice. Not as him being like, stay because I want you to stay, but more like, be sure of the decision you make because you can't walk it back once you do.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. My point is just this is mainly a criticism of the first scene they have together when
Ah,
again Worf is leaving. I feel like it still plays a little bit into that last scene, but it's more a critique of the first scene for Cisco as the character of like, hey, I understand you're trying to relate to him and you don't want him to leave on a spur of a moment, but don't make the mistake of thinking that his personal experience is the same personal experience you're having. That's my
Mhm.
point. Is it felt like Cisco was making that mistake of, hey, Worf, I know what you're feeling. I had the exact same experience. It's like, no, Worf is he is an outcast in a sense. He is
Yeah.
a man that is not quite in the Federation. He's not quite a Klingon in terms of like he didn't grow up with them.
Mhm.
He's a great warrior. I mean, if there's anyone who the title of this episode is referring to is it's Worf.
Yeah.
The way of the warrior is Worf.
It's
He's a
yeah,
great
it's definitely Worf. The Way of the
yeah,
Warrior is definitely all about Worf.
right.
And you're talking about like his past here. That was one of the things I was going to talk about tonight too. The history of Worf. He has always been that outsider. And I mean, you can think back to the first season of Next Generation and how stoic he was, and he was just like a sentry on the bridge, and he barely moved, but he was always quick to action whenever there was a threat or there was a danger,
Right.
And then, we watched him as his character evolved and he kind of got to know people and he loosened up a bit, but he still maintained this rigidity that never seemed to leave him. And even here in this episode, we see a lot of that, especially in that first part of him coming on to um, the station and being greeted by Chief O'Brien, and he's in Quarks later, and he destroys the dartboard with one throw. I mean, his everything about him was just
I'm
he's
not much for
very
games.
right, very regimented,
Take him to
very
this target
stiff.
practice.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. That's exactly it. That's exactly the point. And he's so rigid and he's so serious all the time. And
Yes.
then he's now dealing with a captain who is, well, I mean, he's very different from Cisco, which leads me into the other
For
thing of the
Picard.
evolution. Yeah, very different from Picard. That's what I meant. You undermeant what I stood. Anyway, he's very
For our audience.
yes, but he's very different from Picard. Again, Picard was also so regimented, so about the protocol, and yet when Cisco greets Worf, he's smiling
Yeah.
and he's very open with him right away. And he's
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, I don't want you to go because I just have a feeling that we're gonna need you. Like, don't do anything too hasty." He's very open and very candid with him in a
That's
way
true.
that we never saw
Yeah.
Picard, and
Picard
that's
was very formal. Picard is
yes.
all about the formality. It's part of why you love him. It's also part of his flaw, if you will.
And
Yeah.
if you think about it, Worf presented himself to Cisco in very much the same way that Cisco presented himself to Picard when they first met. And when Picard first met Cisco, he kind of gave him a dressing down because Cisco was like, I was considering leaving and exploring civilian service. And Picard was like, well, I guess we should be looking for your replacement then. You know, he didn't try to convince him to stay or anything like that. He was just like, yeah, we should be looking for your replacement. In the meantime, I expect you to do your duty. But in this one, when it's Cisco on the other side of that same conversation, he's just like, don't do anything too hasty. And in the meantime, yeah, I'm still going to need you to do your job, but let's play this by ear. Let's figure this out. He's
Right.
way more open and understanding of Worf because he's been in that position before.
Right.
And I think that's another reason why, Cisco stands out to me as a great captain. He doesn't try to just be like, screw what you're feeling, do your job. He's more
Yeah.
like, you do have a job to do, but let's try to work out a way that this can be mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
Help us
Yeah.
both.
That's definitely a difference in Picard and Cisco for sure. Yeah. Picard wouldn't do that. Picard would be like, "Can you do?" That's actually, in some ways, the reason that Lieutenant Rowe left is he
Mhm.
didn't meet her on the emotional level and
Yes.
say,
He was always
um,
given that was his famous line all the time. "You are a Starfleet officer." Like,
"Yeah,
that was it. You put on
yes,
the uniform, you got the pips on your collar,
yeah."
you're an officer. You don't have those luxuries anymore, whereas Cisco was more like,
Yeah,
this
I'll say it now. Lieutenant Rowe wouldn't have betrayed Cisco.
no, no, she wouldn't have.
Damn, man.
I don't think she would have either. I think they would have gotten along much better because
Yeah,
they both people coming from trauma and then trying to move beyond that trauma, they would have had a better understanding of each other and their
right,
motivations.
right.
And I don't think they would have argued as much because they would have understood each other. That the pushback would have been, yes, on the Starfleet rules and whatever else. But to me, Whereas Picard's always like they're the Starfleet rules.
Right.
Cisco's always been like, they're more like guidelines.
Guidelines, yeah, the actual
They're
ones, yeah.
they're guidelines.
Well, yeah, just if they do argue though, I mean, Cisco is the passionate one. He would have argued
Mm,
passionately for something. That's exactly what happens in those Maquis episodes where his old friend is leading the Maquis. He's trying to passionately convince him to not, don't go that far, don't take that
mm,
route. Um, but yeah, yeah, it's a good thing to point out those differences between the two characters. It's what makes Picard and Cisco great characters to compare against, is because they are great leaders, but in Cisco's case, it might he's able to connect better. It would seem at times with his
yeah.
people, and but
He,
bringing that up though, bringing up. Oh, sorry, I'll interrupt you.
no,
Go ahead.
no. I was just going to make a quick observation about Picard, and it's one of the continuing things that comes back in the episode about how Picard's style of command doesn't really work anymore. And I think that that's interesting because more and more the people that we see in leadership positions, they're more like Cisco than they are Picard. Like Picard is still like an idealized version of a commander, but everybody recognizes that they can't get there. Instead of
You're talking about
always aspire
in Star Trek as
in
shows or in
in Star Trek Picard, it's
oh in
remarked
the show
upon,
Picard.
yeah,
Got it.
it's
Got
remarked upon about the legendary status that Jean-Luc attained,
it.
and
Right.
how there's all these captains that while they strive for it, they can't hit it. And
Right.
so they have found ways to kind of be okay with not being able to hit that kind of paragon status. And so
Right.
when he's doing things, it's kind of like there's always this reminder that, hey, you are not in command here, and
Right.
this is that the way you think
Right.
doesn't work
Right.
anymore.
Right.
And it's always funny to me that the people who end up saying this to him, they're more like Cisco than they are Picard.
Right.
And so it's just like, yeah, the style of command and the realization of like the implications behind what they do
Right.
is stronger. So
Right.
yeah,
Well, I just want to say that I think though that Picard would have been able to save this alliance with the Klingons if he had been there, because uh, Picard wouldn't have stood for the whole "we are going to, as the Klingons, make a rash decision on our own without the Federation's input or approval." Like Picard would have stood up to the Klingons and said, "Hey, we are your allies. Like you don't just get to run all over us. Like if you want to make a decision to do something, you're going to consult me first, and we're going to make sure that we're in agreement and that we're allies, and you respect me and I respect you, and therefore that's why I'm coming at you like this, because I don't appreciate being disrespected by not being consulted." I think Picard, if he had been here, he could have helped save this whole kerfuffle. But I'm not
yeah,
saying that I wish he was there, because that would have been like the fact that I was thinking about this. Like I had never considered that the Klingons would ever rupture the relationship with the Federation. I just considered it for granted. It was for granted.
right.
The alliance was a done deal.
It was a
That
hundred years. It was 100 years
yeah,
old. It was
it,
mutually beneficial. There was no need for it to
exactly,
not. Yeah,
exactly. And Picard and Worf had already done so many
yeah,
great things for Gowron, for example. Gowron isn't the type who's. I mean, he might be a bit rash. He might be insane, but he respects Picard and Worf, and he's not going to just. But no, that's not what happens. And it was actually a great development. I actually
yeah.
they went there with this episode.
I agree in the sense that if Picard had found out initially about the attack on the Cardassians, I do feel like he would have found a way to justify them standing down from their warmongering. But I think that he would like they would have had to figure out a way for him to basically confirm that there were no changelings in the ruling council, which Cisco wasn't really able to do before there was an attack.
Right.
So I think that would have been the difference there. Picard would have found a way to do that, and Cisco didn't really have um, any jurisdiction to do so. Like I think
Right.
that's one of the benefits of being on a ship because you're traveling, and so
Right.
the captain has to kind of make those on the fly decisions, right?
Right.
Versus on the space station, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
Cisco's power and authority is the station
Right.
and what's granted to him through the Bajoran territory. and
Right.
the Bajoran government.
Right.
So yeah, his abilities stop there. Whereas
Right.
Picard on a ship is traveling, and his authority is backed up by the power of his ship
Right.
and what he can do in those particular moments. So yeah, he would have been. I think that would have been the main difference
Right.
there. And so I agree. I think that he would have found a way to get close enough to verify that there are no Klingon no changelings
Right.
in the Cardassian government.
Right.
But when it comes to the actual battle, when that finally happened, I think they both would have been the same. I think Cisco and Picard would have found a way to hold on long enough until reinforcements arrived,
Yeah.
which is what Cisco does here. So,
Yeah. 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 Um, Also, we didn't. I think you forgot to mention that Garrett got beat up by the Klingons at one scene.
oh, I mean that was the greatest part of the whole battle scene. Like I definitely loved the space battle in general, but when they beamed onto the station and we see the fight in ops, the fight on the promenade, the fight in the in the corridors, and you've got Gul Dukat and Garrick side by side
I
fighting.
hate this fighting hand to
Yes.
hand. I thought you. What does he say? Isn't this better than like interrogations or something? And
Yes, he goes, it's an
interrogations are
oh,
more
he goes, "Yeah, I
civilized.
forgot." He's like, "I forgot you preferred the silent terror of an interrogation room." He's like, "Well, you have to admit it was much more civilized." This is like,
And they're covered
"What?"
in blood.
Right,
And
and he's
the
got
two.
blood on him, and he's, slicing and dicing in one corner, and Garrick's just firing at them because they're coming around the corner like Klingon lemmings and stuff, just round the corner, dead, round the
Yeah.
corner, dead.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Well, I also
great
meant like
scenes.
no, but like literally Garrett got beat up in his tailor shop by the
Oh
Klingons.
yes,
That was
when
that was that was early on. It was proof that the Klingons were starting to get out of hand, and that the one
yeah,
who beats him up is the son of the general, as you pointed out.
Drex.
And so when Worf confronts him and takes his dagger, what's that dagger called?
The Doc Talk.
Yeah, and that's guess his honor, right? Apparently, he said you took my
Yeah, that
son's honor, and
yeah, it's kinda
your
like
son
I
had
always
no honor. I could give it back to you. Yeah.
oh, wait, no, we're not gonna gloss over that old scene. We have to talk about
Okay.
that because that is the to me, that is the true introduction of Martok. We did see
Yes. Yes.
Martok
I would. Yeah.
earlier
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
when he did the blood whatever with Cisco and Kira, but no, this was it.
Yeah.
So, to rehash that scene real quick, yes, Garrick was attacked in his shop by Drex and his cronies, gets beat up pretty severely. He gets treated by Bashir, no big deal.
Another
Worf is now
funny
set to
scene.
the
Yeah.
yes. Worf is now set the task of finding out what's really got the Klingons agitated. He confronts Drex in Quark's bar. He beats him up, flips him over. He's great. Just, one-handed flips him at one point and then
Right.
steals his duck talk from him and keeps it. Scares everybody off with some crazy eyes of his own.
Right.
And so then he's in his quarters, he's putting his stuff away or whatever. Doorbell chimes, and in steps Martok, who delivers the greatest veiled threat I've ever heard. He says, "I've come for my son's duck talk. Give it to me, or I'll take it from you." And I was like, yes, that's awesome. That was great. He just I don't know. Like he didn't even say I'll stab you. He just
Yeah.
give it to me or I'll take it from you. I was like, oh yes. And Worf
Right.
and Worf just hands it over. He's like, yep,
Yeah.
here you go.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man. And
But
then
he's
they have their moment. They're talking
yeah.
there, but
Well, when
that
Worf
was
says
great.
something like you dishonor my son, and he says your son has no honor here.
Yes, he goes. Yeah, he goes. Now that I have your attention, I have no need of it, and he gives it to him.
Right.
And he was like, "So what would cause you to rob my son of his honor?" And he's like, "I cannot rob him of something that he doesn't
That's what
possess."
he says. That's it.
And
Yes.
he's like, "What?" And he goes, "Your son is a fool and a coward." He's like, "What?" And what of his father? And he's like, "Ah, that remains to be seen." And I was like, "Ooh, these two
Yeah.
challenging words you
Well,
throw
that's
me
what I
down
mean
here."
about what's so great about the Klingons is like their whole thing, which Worf is able to do perfectly, is I guess the way I was just thinking about it, it's like the saying of like if you ever have to go to prison, if you want to avoid getting beat up, you go find the biggest dude and you beat him up. So that's the whole
Well,
Klingon culture is
it really is.
you go
You,
find the dude and you confront him and you beat him up and you scare his cronies and that's how you establish dominance in Klingon
oh,
culture. And Worf, thankfully, is good at it, so he's okay.
Yes.
Um, but
And he confronts him, and he didn't get any answers then, but it was enough that like it clearly tipped us off that something else was going on here. And again, JG Hertzler, who plays Martok, phenomenal guy. And this is not the first time that we have seen JG.
oh,
So
he's
little
he's another one of those characters who I felt like I'd seen him before somewhere somehow.
You have, and
Okay.
you've seen him in Deep Space Nine before, but he was playing a Vulcan Starfleet captain. He was the captain of the Saratoga in the pilot episode, and Cisco was his first officer. He dies in the episode.
Oh man, that was so brief.
It was very brief, but when that scene opens up on the Saratoga and they're confronting the Borg cube, the captain, the Vulcan captain sitting in the seat, that's JG as a
Huh,
Vulcan.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and
So,
rewatch that. It's been so long
mhm,
at this point. My goodness.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. So that's good old JG there, and so
gotcha.
he's been a part of Deep Space Nine for a while, but now he's a part of it in a much bigger way, you
Right,
know.
gotcha.
And what a great guy he is. I actually had the opportunity to speak with JG a few
Oh,
years ago when I did a different podcast, and he's great. We had a great time talking about when he played football, when he was in college, and everything else, and his daughter, who's a cook, and everything else. Just a very personable guy. He was running for city councilman a couple
uh
of
huh.
years ago in New York, I believe. And he's very politically inclined, but he's great to talk to. He's got a great personality. Um, Not opinionated in a way that like makes you feel like you can't talk to the guy, because obviously you can't. And in fact, if you
Right.
get him going, you can talk to him for quite a while. He's very engaging. He's very engaging, and I definitely enjoyed my time getting to know him.
Right.
So yeah, I think the world of JG Hertzler, and obviously his character Martok here that we get. And that's the only other Easter egg I'll give you for, or spoiler that I'll give you for Deep Space Nine. We do see more of Martok, so
Ah,
we are not finished with this old Klingon.
gotcha. Um, yeah, I want to go back real quickly to Garrick real fast.
Yes.
One thing I again texted you is there's everything in this episode. The only thing that wasn't in it, as I think about it, was Jake. Jake was not in this episode, nor
No.
Nog, but we have Garrick and Goldukat, and so Garrick, after he gets beat up, apparently several ribs got broken, and Bashir
Yes.
patches him up, and his Garrick's response to the whole thing is like, "Ah, I got patched up, I'm fine,"
That's
and
right.
he's,
He's like, yeah, they didn't do any serious damage.
yeah, you're
He's like,
here.
they fractured your clavicle, they broke two of your transverse ribs, and you have you had a damaged orbital socket. And he's like, yeah, but thanks to your administrations, I'm almost completely healed. But I did severe damage to their ego.
That's it.
You
Yes.
know,
Yeah, it'll last forever. And then he also jokes about, I don't know why the Klingons would have anything against us. It's not like we've had any like conflicts. And then Bashir's like, y'all had a war for like 19 years.
right?
What
It's
are
like
you talking?
y'all fought a whole war, and he's like, it was a minor skirmish. It's like it lasted 23 years.
Yeah, yeah.
He was like,
He's like,
that was ages ago.
yeah, yeah. I love Garrick just downplays anything that he doesn't want to, or that he just wants to downplay. And then when he turns and he gets invited by Cisco to come take my measurements, and he's like, "I
Mhm.
already have your measurements." He's like, come take them again anyway." And they discuss they discuss that the Cardassians are about to be invaded in front of
Yeah.
Garrick, so that Garrick then calls Gul Dukat. Um, Gul Dukat, having realized that the civilian government was about to be in power, so he switched allegiance to the civilian government.
Mhm.
Tells Gul Dukat, "Hey, you need to get your people to safety," and that allows the Defiant to go and do its thing. Um, I
Which
liked that Cisco left Kira in charge back on the station. Every time
Mhm.
they've left, I've been like, "You just cut the head of the snake off of your own organization. Like, who's in charge back at the station?" So I like that O'Brien, who's working on the defenses, and Kira are left to be in charge of the station.
O'Brien, Kira, and Odo are still there.
Yes. Yeah.
Are still there.
Um,
Um,
oh, and speaking of, oh, I'll say it later. Go ahead. You're gonna say something.
I was going to say another little funny moment was when Cisco and company went to go and rescue Gul Dukat and the Tapa Council, and then Gul Dukat comes onto the bridge, and as soon as he walks through the doors, he says, "Captain, could you tell the security guard that he would no longer be necessary? He's making me feel unwelcome." And Dax is like, "I was right. You owe me dinner." And he's just like, "What's that about?" And he's like, Captain Cisco bet me that you would." Thank him
Oh,
first for rescuing you before
before
you start
complaining.
complaining. And yeah, he was like, and I lost. So
Yeah,
now he owes you dinner. I was like, wow,
and he
you guys,
turns
you
and
guys
he
suck.
turns yeah, and he turns to Worf and says, "Do you know you have a Klingon on board?" Like,
You have a
yeah,
Klingon on your ship? And he's like,
yeah,
yeah, that's not the Klingon you should be worried about.
yeah,
Show him. And
yeah,
here these two ships are powering through coming after
yeah,
him. It's
exactly.
like, yeah.
Um,
And he's like, I suggest that you cloak. And Worf's like, we lost our cloaking device rescuing you, you jerk. It's
yeah,
like,
and
man,
and during the whole transport sequence, they're getting bombarded, and they're like, "It's gonna take us another 2 minutes." He's like, "Well, I guess we're gonna find out how well this ship can, take a beating or whatever Cisco says."
yeah.
Um,
Which
yeah, and then
The Defiant held up beautifully. I loved watching those scenes of the ship ducking and dodging and veering
yes,
around and taking shots and giving them right back. I mean, it was
yes,
great. It was just
yeah,
like a kind of like in its own little space prize fight. The
right,
Defiant did not back down, did not disappoint at all.
right.
Shows why that ship was, the little powerhouse that it is. Loved watching it.
And this is what I want from Deep Space Nine, and I want more of it. I want a tiny fleet of ships, the Defiant being like the flagship of Deep Space Nine, and a number of like little fighters that I want them to have to defend the station from in fights. I want them to have to get into firefights. I want them to have to the Defiant has to go do a mission and come back. I want that. I like that play. I just want to make sure that Deep Space Nine isn't left leaderless while they're out doing that. But I
Yeah,
like the idea that they have a ship or multiple ships that they use as for fighting. They have to defend the station. They defend,
because
Cardassians, the Bortorans, and
it's a
yeah,
station. It's stationary. It's not.
exactly
There is no maneuverability there. They do need something that can,
right.
again,
The
fly
runabouts
around.
have been a underpowered version of that. They are literally just transport vessels, science vessels at best. And I get it that what their purpose was, but I want action. I like the action. I appreciate the action. And this episode gave me what I wanted. We got a big firefight at the station. We got the Defiant going out and doing its own thing. I like that quite a lot. Um, and speaking of fighting, we haven't got to this yet. The whole Dax and Worf fight in the Hollow Suite.
Yes, cannot forget.
And
This
before
was.
that, even the meeting Kira and Dax they were all
Oh
dressed up
yes,
for Lancelot.
yes. So this was kind of an extension of the first part where Dax was trying to get Kira to engage in the holodecks because we know that Kira
Engaged,
doesn't
wink,
really.
wink, nod,
Yeah,
nod. Yeah,
right. Well, we know Kira doesn't really like the hollow suites, and so here was Dax trying to get her to kind of come out of her shell a little bit. And so it was intimated that they've been doing these programs together. That Dax is coming up with ways to kind of get Kira to just loosen up a bit. And so then here we see them coming out of the hollow suites, and they've got the big flowy gowns on because we don't know exactly what program they were running, but we're assuming it had something to do with Arthur and Camelot and so forth because she
well,
was playing.
Lancelot tried kissing Kira, but she was
Yes,
playing a married woman, so she
yes.
slapped him right back.
So Kira's sensibilities would not allow her to be romanced by the licentious Lancelot,
Yes.
and so she knocks him out. And they're just relaying all this while Worf is standing there like, "What?" And then his response of, "Nice hat, great." Like, this is our first officer, and they're trying to like stifle a laugh.
Yeah.
This is our first officer, Major Kira. He's like, "Nice hat."
Yeah, and it's great from Worf because he's always so deadpan. Yeah.
He really is like, and I think that's why he's so like he's unintentionally funny because he's so
Yes.
deadpan that when he says things, you can't help but laugh, and you recognize like how ridiculous something would seem to someone not in the group, right? Because
Right.
everybody else saw them coming down the steps and no one batted an eye. But
Right.
here's Worf, and he's just like, yeah, nice hat. And they couldn't help but laugh.
Yeah.
They were all chuckling behind it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
great stuff. And then, of course, then Dax turns it on him and she embarrasses him by whatever it is she says to him in Klingon.
Yeah.
And um,
It's
very,
it gets
very,
lost in translation.
yeah, a very lovely scene for Terry Farrell. I mean, she looked great, and she was just delivering this very playful line with
Right.
Worf. Again, he was just so serious,
Right.
and it's just like, yeah, she could
Yeah.
light up anybody. She just,
S-
it was so great.
Speaking of Dax for a moment, I just want to say, I actually, now that I think about it, this another reason this episode was great is because all the cast had something to do. It felt
Yes,
like they were always. I mean, it's not like Kira and O'Brien and Bashir all were featured or Odo is featured. It was a Cisco and Worf episode. If we're gonna say it's an episode of a certain character or not, but every
yeah.
character had their place. I didn't feel like Dax was being left out in this episode.
No, in fact, I think that with well, with how much emphasis they always placed on her uh Klingon attachment and kind of fixation. I
Mhm.
think that Worf coming to the show gave her more to do in that regard
Right.
because when he was, still feeling out of sorts and was trying to, get his focus right, here he is in the holodeck fighting monsters in her program that she
Right.
created. So
Right.
this gives us a chance for those two to interact for the first time, and it was a
Right.
great interaction. She's critiquing him on his fighting ability and so forth in a kind of joking manner, and then he puts her flat on her back
Yeah.
for her critique,
Mhm.
So and then she's just like she also kind of helps him to bridge the gap a little bit with Cisco and formulating next steps and stuff.
Right.
So and then she's there to explain to Cisco what it means when Martok delivers him uh Mchar's or K-Box Duck Talk from the Mchar when he killed him.
Right.
So yeah, she's able to kind of help direct a lot of things here. And yeah, you do feel like everybody had something to do in this episode. And then of course we have the fight scene on in Ops, and Dax is right there with the batleth
Right.
delivering blows. She was fantastic.
Yeah. And again, as we talked about it before, the batleth is a very interesting weapon, and it's a great, unique weapon. And they have done a lot to make it make sense. Like, there's the
Yeah.
overhand swinging, which makes sense. It's a weapon where you could easily change your grip, so you could do overhand swings or just swings from the side. But tripping your opponent and causing them to fall over is a major part of it. It's in some ways it's not about hitting them with a pointy end. It's about just getting them on their feet from out under them.
Yeah.
That's how you win. You don't win by killing them, and at least in these more ceremonial or just practice things, it's about just causing them to lose their footing.
Yeah, it's about
Which
knocking them down.
and I again, it's another example of I think the Klingons are the most successful thing that I think Star Trek did. Not because nothing else is successful. I'm just saying it's a unique, it's a very specific way of expressing
Yeah.
how successful Star Trek has been overall. Is that
You
I
know,
understand Klingons and I appreciate them and I like them. They're fun, they're crazy and they're weird, but I like them. So
considering all the alien races that Star Trek has come up with in its 6 decades of production, um, there's very few races that stand out as much as the Klingons. Like if I had to rank them, it'd be Vulcans, Klingons, Borg, Romulans, and the Romulans are not nearly as close as those first three. You
mm,
know, um, uh, the Vulcans have been there since the beginning, and we got a lot of stuff from them because of Spock on the original series,
right,
But yeah, considering that Klingons really just kind of came into their own, really through the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. I
right,
mean, they became an integral part of the framework of the show. Like
yeah,
again, Worf was such a popular character that I mean, he went from Next Generation to Deep Space Nine, and even on Voyager, they like the idea of a Klingon with them so much that they have a half Klingon serving on Voyager.
mm,
You know, So it's just like that idea of the Klingon culture was so strong. And yes, we're always going to give the writers and creators a lot of credit,
Right.
but I'm also going to give a lot of credit to Michael Dorn
Oh yeah.
because he's played Worf so well, and especially coming from when they clearly did not know what they wanted to do with that character to what
Yeah.
he is now,
Right.
one of the most prolific characters, actors in Trek.
Right.
He is already credited. He's been in more Star Trek stuff, more episodes, more movies than any other character
Right.
in Trek history. And that's saying something, especially when you consider the longevity of the original series cast, and in particular Leonard Nimoy as Spock.
Right.
Um, but he's been in more stuff than any other character, any other
Right.
actor.
Right.
That is a huge compliment to him. He has done so much for Star Trek, and he obviously it's just continuing because he's now in Picard, playing the same character, just older in the
Yeah.
timeline there. So yeah, I don't. There's no. They're not going to be able to cap his record for a long time, especially now that they don't do 26 episode seasons anymore, and there hasn't been a Star Trek movie in a while, and now he's adding to it with Picard.
Picard.
And if he does a spin-off, he's just going to cap it out. And I just think that that's hilarious. That in
Yeah.
order for someone to beat his record, if you look at the way the shows are filmed now, they would have to play they would have to play their character from start to finish for at least 30 years to catch up.
Yeah.
Like nonstop though.
Yeah.
Not where he did it in 7 years on this show, 5 years on this show, whatever. And no. They'd have to do it for 30 years continuously.
Yeah.
Hilarious. The
Yeah.
man has solidified his record. So,
It's true.
but yeah, I'm gonna give Michael Dorn a lot of credit. He is such a great actor, and he really owns that persona of Worf. And the evolution of that character has meant a lot to a lot of people. And again, Worf is one of my favorite characters. I know we've talked a lot about Odo for this show, but when it comes to favorite characters in Trek overall, Worf wins for me every time.
Yeah.
And that's in large part due to Michael Dorn.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely. Yeah. What's so great about his portrayal is that he's supposed to be a character who again he was caught between two worlds, and you get
Mhm.
that sense. You can feel it. You can feel the he has to be more reserved than other Klingons because he's amongst humans, but he fully understands and can embrace the Klingon culture. Everything from being able to fight like a Klingon to confront other Klingons on their terms. Again, in the bar, Quark's bar, and then in his quarters with the General Martok. And with Gowron, great scene there. We already mentioned
Mm.
it, but yeah, I always love Gowron. He's shorter than other Klingons, so you'd think he's like a pipsqueak amongst them, but he commands respect for whatever reason.
Yeah,
He's
he
just
does.
and
He's a
those
vicious little
crazy
monster.
eyes, yeah.
Yes, he's a vicious little monster with those eyes. Um,
He's hilarious.
I still remember the first time we ever saw Gowron on Next Generation when they were doing the Rite of Ascension, and they were trying to figure out who was going to be the next leader of the High Council. And so we had Duras on one side, Gowron on the other side, and they were sitting in the conference room on the Enterprise D. And Duras is just talking and talking and talking. And Gowron is sitting there, and he's sitting with his hands like balled up in fists planted on his thighs, and he's just all puffed, like this, and he's just glaring at him with those eyes. And I was like, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with this guy? And then, I found out later on, that was actually a little tip of direction from Jonathan Frakes to use the eyes because when they did all the prosthetics and everything else for the guy who plays Gowron,
Mhm.
it stood out so much. They were like, yeah, just use it, just go with it, don't shy away from it.
Right.
And man, did he take that advice and run with it because those eyes have become like that's the look, man. He
Yeah.
just does it. You're just like, oh, what a threat
Yeah.
to widen your eyes the way you do, and that's enough for people to be like, "Oh, this guy's nuts. This guy's
Yeah.
crazy."
Yeah.
But he does it so well, absolutely so well.
He does. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
great.
then again, the idea that he ends the Accords, like
Yeah,
I mean, I guess what I'm just thinking about is like, and obviously you know this, but the question now is the rest of the show going to be about? Is that going to be a major issue going forward? That the Klingons, like this alliance, truly is ended? It's not a one episode.
Mhm.
We ended it, but at the end of the episode, it's been corrected, and the show goes back to the standard of whatever the
Uh,
status quo was before. We return to that. No, but not in this episode.
so
Is it a
so
1, 2, 3 episode arc? Is it going to be a whole season
yeah.
arc? That's the
So
question now.
as I've been telling you, like I was so eager for us to get to this point in the show because I feel like this is when Deep Space Nine really started to understand itself and realize its potential
Hmm.
and was
Right,
laying that groundwork. Now we had some early things from like season 3 that will, that are important and will come back up throughout this season and every season after this. But what we're seeing right now is the major framework for everything that is from here to the end of the show. All of this is important. All of these things are going to be referenced again and again and again. And so
right,
that's all I'm going to tell you on that front because I don't want to spoil it for you. But
right,
yeah, I'm agreeing with you. This is not a one-off. This is not
right,
a quick fix solve thing. We
right,
will have to deal with all of this stuff several times
right,
before we get to a true resolution, which comes at the end.
right,
This is again where I feel like the storytelling for this show really takes off, where they're really starting to get into um, branching out when it comes to their serialization
right.
and getting into their story arcs. So, and I believe that this also lines up with what the showrunner Ira Stephen Bear was talking about at the time. There's been a documentary um, about Deep Space Nine, which we'll watch later, much later. But there's a moment in that documentary where he talks about, they felt like Paramount kind of forgot about them for a while, and they were so busy with what to do with the TNG cast. They were coming off of the Generations movie, and there was already talk of doing yet another movie. And then, Voyager was running full steam ahead. And then, of course, there was the launching of a new network, UPN, so they were trying to do all this stuff. And so they just kind of feel like while all these things, all these plates were spinning, everybody forgot about Deep Space Nine,
Right.
which gave them the ability to kind of just branch out and do what they wanted. And so
Gotcha.
this is where they were really trying to push through certain things. And he talks about how there's this moment where it happens, and then when people finally start to come back around and pay attention to what they're doing, it's kind
Right.
of a too little, too late. They're
Right.
so deep into the storyline,
Right.
you can't stop it. You can't stop the train anymore.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. In terms of like ramifications going forward, this episode starts hinting at it, saying that
yeah,
those first Cardassian settlement planets that were defeated early on, they've been conquered, and the Klingons aren't leaving. They aren't giving them up.
yes,
Um, the whole point that they were trying to make was that if the Dominion have conquered Cardassia, then we're in trouble. But then, Cisco was like, well, if we're all fighting amongst ourselves, it's exactly what the Dominion wants, and we haven't seen any activity on their end of the wormhole
right.
at this time, which is interesting because again, the very last episode of last season was the this changeling telling Odo like we're
We're
everywhere.
everywhere.
So
We're everywhere.
it's already completed. The episode started with us. Great opening. I haven't said it yet. This is a fantastic opening.
Oh
The
yeah, it
idea
was.
that there was a changeling on board. I was immediately invested. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, changelings. They said they were going to be here. It makes sense. They're having to deal with it. And
We're
no, it's
kind
a
of
training
picking up
exercise.
yeah, we're kind
Yeah,
of picking up where we left off. Odo said that they were everywhere, and here's the very next scene that we see
right,
after, which would have been a hiatus for us if you were watching this during the original broadcast.
right,
Here we are coming back some months later, and they're on the hunt. We see Cisco and Kira side by side, phasers ready,
right,
shooting at the station. We don't know what's going on,
right.
and yeah, and we certainly don't know it's a training exercise
We
until the very end,
Yeah, we found him
you
on
know?
level 19. He's escaping. And
Yeah.
what got me, which made me think it was a real changeling, is that he turns into a bird briefly. And as um, we know that Odo can turn into a bird, but we know that he has a hard time replicating things. So I just
Yeah.
immediately was like, "Oh yeah, it's a real changeling," because birds. Yeah, that's a
Well, and
real.
he attacked them. If you
Right.
remember the scene when they walked into the guest quarters and they fired their, phaser sweep, he
Right.
rolled off of the chair and pushed them both into the wall to
Right.
escape. And so
Right.
yeah, I mean, like I was like, oh, it's attacking them and trying to move on. But yeah,
Right.
we had no
Yeah.
reason to believe that it wasn't, a more dangerous changeling than it
An
was.
actual attack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, they did a
Great
great job.
opener right there.
And I have to say,
Yeah.
Kira looked great. I love seeing her. They've changed her uniform a little bit more in this opener, and her hairstyle had changed. I mean, she looked better to me than in previous. So she looked. I don't want to say like better. Yeah, she looked more comfortable. I guess I should say, right? She didn't look as like her old uniform was very boxy. Like it had these really stiff shoulders, and
Yeah.
then that was gone
Right.
here in this, and she looked, yeah, like it was a more appropriate, comfortable uniform, you know, not so
Well,
stiff.
I certainly would say part of that was probably her hair because her hair in this episode, yeah, her hair isn't as stiff. It's longer, but also not as tightly cut in this episode. I noticed
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
allowed to be more out. I don't know,
loose.
out there's the
Yeah,
correct word. It wasn't
I was,
quite as just cut tight.
yeah. That before it was kind of like it looked like it was
Yeah,
kind of like shellacked
yeah,
down on her head, and now it was just more natural. So, but yeah,
yeah. Exactly. It was more
yeah.
natural this time.
But I loved it. I loved you're absolutely right. I
Oh
love this
man,
opening. Overall great episode. And so final question of
I remember
course
there's one
is
other thing.
go ahead. Before we get to the final question,
Oh,
go ahead.
you had asked me if I was gonna remember if I were to try and guess where the halfway point was in the
Mhm.
episode where it went from episode 1 to 2, and then while watching it, I wasn't thinking about that. So now I'm just. Do you have anything to say? Is there a particular point of one episode to the other that where
No,
that point
because
was the where it?
because I remembered it. Because so when I had watched this a while back, I had watched it on Netflix. And Netflix did something weird, and they didn't input the same break that it should have had, and I didn't realize
Okay.
that it was different on Paramount Plus. So when I went back and checked it again, they actually split it where it was supposed to split. So I realized when I told you that I had not gone and checked it. So then when I went
Okay.
back and checked it, I was like, oh well, I guess, and I was like, oh, that makes sense because Netflix was the reason that I thought it was wrong, and now here it is on
Ah,
Paramount, and Paramount owns Star
has it
Trek.
right.
So if
Yeah.
if it's fun, they would have fixed it, and they did
Right.
fix it. So there
Right.
isn't a thing there anymore. But if you were a person who
Gotcha.
watched it on Netflix way back when, the break was when um, it's shortly after Worf comes on the station for the first time,
Okay.
and he's on his way to meet Cisco. They break it there for some reason. I have no idea why. I always thought it was a
That's
weird
so
glitch,
early.
but it
Yeah.
is. It's also really early. But yeah, there's just this weird like blackness, and then it opens up like it's a new episode again. I don't know why they did that, but yeah, they didn't. Obviously, they didn't do that on
Paramount
Paramount
Plus.
Plus. So if
Yeah,
you
it's
watch it,
just one big episode on Paramount
yeah,
Plus.
it's just one big, and to me that makes it even better because it's a very seamless transition,
Yeah.
and I mean it worked kind of like just a commercial break. You don't
Well,
even really
actually,
notice.
well, it was funny. I was watching this episode. For some reason, the commercial breaks weren't input on this episode, so I was able to watch the whole hour 30 without breaks.
Yep.
I was very happy. Obviously, I hate commercial breaks.
Yes. Yes. I do too. Yeah, they didn't. I noticed that too. They didn't have them in there, and I'm like, I don't know if it's just because it's they put this
Longer
together as a whole
episode. Yeah.
episode or whatever. But yeah, no breaks. So I really appreciated that as well.
Yeah.
Um, great stuff. So as I was gonna say, final question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Um, who is the best character in Star Trek, and why is it Worf? So that's it.
In Star Trek, all of Star Trek. Oh
Yes,
man.
and as I said, who is the best character? Not your favorite, but who is the best, and
Okay,
why is it Worf?
so Data
Um,
doesn't get a
no,
chance,
no.
and Beverly Crusher doesn't get a chance, and Dax, who doesn't get enough episodes, doesn't get a chance. uh, well, I feel like I mean, obviously your answer is Worf, but I feel like the answer most people would give is a captain, Picard or Cisco.
Well, the captains always get it. Like whenever
Yeah,
you ask that question, whenever you say who is the best, everybody's going to shout out a captain. I like Kirk. I like Janeway. I like Archer. I like what? Okay, I didn't ask that because
the best
the
captain, the
captains,
best
right?
character.
And the captains all exist in their own little bubble. You have to. You can only really compare them to other captains. You can't compare them to. You can't compare. Uh, you know, Picard to Tuvok or whatever, right? It doesn't work because they're not on the same level.
Right.
And so that's why I always just say you're the best character who represents, kind of
Q.
an all around. What did you say? What blasphemy did you just utter? Strike that immediately. We'll be
Hey,
editing that out,
you keep
folks.
bring along, move along home to me every chance you get. So I'll mention Q if I want to.
Oh man, David's favorite episode.
Oh gosh.
Um,
Sorry, I interrupted you. Keep
no,
going.
I mean, but no, and that's why I say Worf because to me he represents like he is us. And what
Right.
I mean by that is he is the definitive outsider trying to participate in a world that is otherwise alien to him,
Right.
which is us because obviously we don't exist in this kind of futuristic world, nor do we exist really in anything that's even close. This kind of
Right.
utopian society, they've solved all their internal problems and now they're having external conflict and they face those on a united front. That's
Right.
not something that we've ever really seen before. And
Right.
here's this person with their own sense of honor and morality and an idea of how we would like to handle things. And we have to rethink that in order to fit into the society that, even at our best, we don't totally fit into.
Right.
And he finds ways to succeed. And of course, he's got his flaws, but yeah, overall, he's a very successful character, and I think that's why he works for me as the best character versus some of the others that just they come off as kind of one note. Like as much as I like Riker, for example, one of the things that is always amplified in Riker is his um womanizing, his attractability.
Right.
And I mean that does calm down over the years, but you have to admit throughout Next Generation, that was kind of the major draw of William Riker
Right.
was he's the playboy,
Right.
you know. So so that's why again Worf always stands out to me because he just seemed it's funny that the most alien to me seemed the most relatable of individuals.
Yeah, I would certainly say that it's a powerful archetype in storytelling, the outsider, the one who doesn't fit in and has to fight against the grain. And Worf really gets to embody that quite powerfully. Again, as in two cultures, and as a representative of a completely alien culture. And I don't mean just alien as in he's an alien. I mean like foreign to us as a culture. Um, the Klingons are unique, and that's again why I've said it multiple times this episode that coming to understand and appreciate the Klingons is the greatest success that Star Trek has had, in my opinion. Um, they sing
Mhm.
opera. That was the other part.
Oh
Oh, that
yes,
was the other thing when Garrick
Klingon
was it?
opera.
Yeah, Garrick said. He said. What did he say? They'll write a poem or a ballad about you to
That
Bashir. And he
was
said,
that was Bashir talking about Odo, and about the use of phasers. And Odo
that's
was
what it
just like,
was.
"I've never used them. I don't see a reason to start." And he's like, "Yeah, but if they kill you, then someone's gonna write an opera about it, and I don't want to hear
Killing a
it."
changeling. Yes.
Yeah, and he's like,
He
"I
said,
expect." He said they're gonna write a poem about you, and I don't want to
yeah,
hear it. And Odo's like,
yeah.
"I expect nothing less than a full opera
That's
if
what it
someone
was.
gets me." So
And that's
yes.
and that's exactly it. The Klingons have opera. Of all things, they have opera and they have chefs
Oh,
who sing it while cooking whatever it is.
oh,
And they have
David.
insults and
Another mild spoiler for you. You're in for a treat because we
he
get to
comes
hear
back.
we get to hear some Klingon opera later on. sung by none other than Worf
Worf? Oh,
himself.
right.
We get
Okay.
to hear some
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, he
So
was. Uh-oh. There you go.
hang on, I'll be
The
back.
the camera did that right at the hour 30-minute mark. I think it's telling us it's we're getting toward the end here. But oh, and his headphones are off. Yeah.
Sorry,
I was saying that it's an hour 30 in, and it fell right at the hour 30 mark. I think it's
it
telling
sure
us
did.
this is the
It was
longest
it was
episode we've
saying,
ever done.
I need you guys to shut up already. I'm tired.
Oh man, is there anything else to talk about? I feel like we've been able to hit
No,
everything.
we have gotten through everything that I had marked that I wanted to talk about. Oh, no, we did. We got through everything.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm just glad we hit like the funny moments because again, what was great about this episode had action. It had all of our characters. It had risk. It had actual ramifications going forward, and it had humor. It was a funny episode. We haven't even talked about Quark. Quark doesn't want you know. Worf only buys prune juice or orders prune juice. There's nothing to get from prune juice, and he gives Garrick a bottle of the one drink, and Garrick's
oh,
like,
yes, we actually do need to talk about that before we go. So that's
"Okay,
another great moment.
let's do it,"
So
because
we
yeah,
will let's get into that real quick. So just to set that up for us. So the Klingons have now disappeared for a moment. We know that something is going on.
right,
And Quark comes, not Quark, but Garrick comes into the bar and orders some Kanar, which is a Cardassian drink, which, by the way, you can order on StarTrekSpirits.com if you want some. So we'll plug there. No, we're not being paid. I just know you can, so do it. Anyway, he orders a glass of Kanar, and Quark basically gives him the whole bottle. He's like, I'm not going to be offloading this anytime soon. And
yeah,
so he gives it to him. And, Garrick makes the joke. He's like, oh, forgive me what the impending destruction of my people may do to your business.
right,
So they're having their little moment. And then Quark's like, I want you to try something for me. And he
root
takes
beer.
them out a glass and pours it. And he's like, what is it? And he's like, it's an earth drink called root beer. And Garrick's like, nah, I don't want to. He's like, oh, come on. Aren't you just a little bit curious? Just try it. And I love how he like slides it slowly over to him. And then before he tries it, Garrick looks around like he's trying to make sure no one's judging him while he tries this earth drink. And then he takes a sip and he's like, oh, it's vile. And he's like, I know, it's just so bubbly and happy and cloying, just like the Federation. And then he's like, but you know what's bad? If you drink enough of it,
You
you start to
start to
like
like
it. And he's like, it's insidious,
it.
just like the Federation. And so it's
Yeah,
this great little breakdown of root beer. And
right.
as great of a scene as that is, I have to agree. Like, I don't know anybody who doesn't like root beer. It may not be the first carbonated beverage that you go for, right? You
Yes,
may
yes,
call yourself a Coca-Cola person or a Dr. Pepper person or whatever that is.
right.
But if all a person has to offer you is root beer,
No one will
you'll
turn
probably
it down.
you'll
Yeah,
probably take it. Yeah, they won't turn it down.
right.
And I don't know what that is, but
It's true.
it's
Now that you
interesting
mention
that
it.
even in the 24th century, root beer of all things has survived to the
Right.
point of being the known other aliens know us by root beer,
And
you
it's
know?
so true. Like anyone who's tasted root beer can immediately remember what it tastes like, and it's exactly right. Bubbly, cloying,
It's
and you like
sweet.
it the more you drink it.
Yeah, it's sweet and it's different from every other soda that
It
you've
is
had. Like
truly unique.
you
Yeah.
can't think of anything else that really tastes like it. Other sodas and things like that, they share taste or whatever, but root beer is root beer. Like that is
Yes.
it. It has a very distinctive taste. People do those taste tests. Can you tell the difference between Pepsi and Coke and whatever else, blah, blah, blah. Those exist because they are so similar that
Right.
it's easy to confuse people, but you cannot confuse root beer with anything else. It is a very
Right.
distinctive flavor, and I
Right.
think that's why it lasts over
Yeah.
everything else. But yeah, and I don't think, and again, I have not met someone who totally dislikes it. Again, it might not be your go-to choice,
Right.
but to say you actively do not like it, I don't think so.
Right.
Now I could be wrong. If somebody out there is like, "Oh my god, even the smell of root beer makes me want to vomit," I apologize. But unfortunately, for the next 400 years, we're all going to be known by root beer. So get over it. Sorry to tell you.
Yeah, yeah,
No, but again, great scene, great little moment where we're dealing with two aliens analyzing the psyche of humanity
yeah.
here.
I
But yeah,
guess
what
there
do you
is
want to
one
say
other
about that
small
scene?
thing, and nothing else about that scene, but there is one other small thing we haven't talked about, and that I forget her name, but Cisco's love interest. We haven't really talked about her at all.
Cassidy, yes,
Yeah,
Cassidy is back.
briefly,
Um,
yeah.
she brings Cisco a gift, a baseball hat from her brother.
8 weeks away to go visit him and see a game, and Cisco's like,
Jesus,
I
yeah.
might just want to do that. And he had some, what was it, silk?
Some Tholian silk that he got
Yeah,
from the Tholian ambassador,
yeah. He
which
had owed me
apparently
a
is
favor.
some, yeah,
Yeah,
apparently some high end silk.
yeah,
That he gave her,
right,
and yeah, they're having their you're getting ready to have their meal together. Cisco is dressed in a Jake Cisco finest,
right.
this hodgepodge of colors and clothes he just threw on in the last minute there. I don't know what they were thinking with that. He looks like he walked through a
He looks
carpet
like,
store and just started pulling out stuff
yeah, and then
and putting
barfed
it
on
on.
himself.
Yeah. There's just like it's weird colors, like, it's mostly brown, and
you
then
know,
there's, like, part of it that's black, and then there's this weird splash of purple on one shoulder, and it's like this odd pattern of stripes and checkers or something, it was
it's
bad.
it's funny you say that because I was thinking that when she came on screen with her blue, she doesn't have a dress on exactly, but her whole outfit's just one solid blue. I remember
It's
thinking,
a very solid, vibrant blue,
and
even the
she looks
shoes.
nice. She looked
Right,
nice.
even the shoes were the same color, and I was like, "How did" I mean, she looks so great when she steps through the door, and then she's standing there next to this guy who looks like he got beat
A
up and then
kaleidos,
blindfolded and dressed.
yeah, a kaleidoscope beat him up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, "What is going on here? You can afford Tholian silk because clearly you don't have any money for your own clothes." Like, I just
Should have kept that for
man,
yourself there, Cisco.
right.
Yeah.
Make yourself a decent shirt, man. Like, I don't know what that is with them when they're like, "Oh, my off-duty clothes are terrible." I guess that's what it is because everything is programmed through the replicator, and since the uniform is pre-programmed, they don't think about it anymore. So the idea of
Fashion.
design,
Yeah.
right, just goes out the window. And I'm like, "You have a tailor on your station.
That's
Go
so
see
true.
him. Go
How often
see
has
him. Let him
Garrett
think."
just been like, why?
Oh,
Why?
I must imagine he people watches every day. Like, he just posts up outside of his
What
shop and
what
just
if that's
watches them walk
Garrick's
by.
taste? What if that's Garrick's revenge on the world is he's
I
given
refuse to
everyone
believe I refuse to believe that Garrick made that.
No, that's my point though. Like it's his revenge on the world. He's intentionally giving out bad fashion advice to
Uh,
everyone he meets.
maybe.
That's his that's how he gets through the torture of having to be a tailor is he just
Oh, as
intentionally screws it up for everybody else. Uh
he's back at them because he's no longer the spy master that he wants to be. So he just imparts poor fashion advice on the aliens that pass through
yeah.
the system.
Maybe he's like
Wow.
worked secret messages in the clothing, so his that's how he gets messages out.
Well,
Is his clothing
if
actually hides messages? His people wearing them don't realize they're passing messages along to other people or something.
if that is not just he's just the source of misplaced rage because the Cardassians are the ones who expelled him, and yet everybody else has to suffer. So,
Including us.
man,
Yeah,
yes, including us. So, and I've already remarked that I enjoy Cardassian architecture, and some of their clothing is pretty nice
right,
as well. I like some of that styling, but yeah, Jake and Ben are holding it down on
right,
ugly clothes, man.
right,
They are just awful,
right.
just awful.
Yeah.
So, but you're
Well, as
right.
we
It was nice to see Cassidy
right,
again and see how close they've become. Because in
right,
the last few episodes that where we did see her, we know that they had just gone really on one date. We didn't know that there's been more, and that's kind of what we're left to assume here in this is that um, they've been together more
right,
times.
right,
So
right. Yeah,
and yeah, and she's even she's going on a mission soon which is going to separate them again, and then he's leaving as well.
Right.
So their time is short. They even remark about how their time has sucked,
Yeah.
but it's getting better.
And they
So
have a kiss,
yes.
passionate kiss.
So yeah, things are progressing for Cisco. Our man's coming into his own. The evolution of Cisco from postpartum widower to station captain, and he's got a budding relationship, and uh, yeah, doing all right for himself. Pretty proud of man. Pretty proud of him.
Exactly. Yeah.
So but all right, I think that that will do it. We're not quite at 2 hours, which is probably a good thing because this was a lot. I mean, a two-parter, of course, but that makes
Yeah.
sense. Um, did want to wrap this up by just quickly reminding people again of the giveaway contest. So all you have to do is wherever it is that you're listening. I think that I did see a thing about on Spotify in particular, they're opening it up to where you can leave comments on podcasts that you listen to and things like that. So you can do it there. You can do it pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. I know Apple has the same thing now. And then if you are watching this through our YouTube channel, you can leave a comment there. And all we're going to do, again, just something that you heard on this show that you either liked or disliked, whatever that is, again, keep it, you know, G rated here. My kid's running around under seeing terrible words on my screen, please. So keep it polite. And then what we're going to do is just for the comments that we find, we're going to take a big mass of them, put your username on a sheet. We'll draw it out, and then we'll reach out to you. We'll message you and get the particulars so we can send you your personal um, Fire Caves mug. And again, you won't have to pay anything for it. You just got to tell us where we can send it to you, and it's yours.
Right.
Okay. So real simple contest, probably the easiest contest you'll ever have to enter, and it costs you nothing. So take advantage of that while you can. There is going to be a time window for this because obviously we have the live broadcast, then we've got what's going to be on YouTube, and then of course listening to it on um, wherever it is you listen to podcasts. So we'll give this a couple of weeks, and then on a future dated episode, we will announce who won, if anybody, because obviously people have to comment, and then that'll be it. We're just going to say your username. We're not going to tell your particulars. Oh, so and so's username, aka Sam Smith in Wisconsin. Or not going to do that. Just your username, and that's it. Um, but yeah, that's all you have to do, and you'll get to enjoy your mug.
Woohoo.
So coming up next week, we have another great episode. This is one that frequently ranks at the top of uh, top 10 lists of best episodes of Trek or must watch episodes of Trek or best episodes of Deep Space Nine. This is one of them coming up. It is The Visitor, of course. And David, you are in for a really, heartfelt treat here in this next one. So
Okay.
that's all I'm going to say about it. And
All right.
until next time, yeah, just be prepared because it gets you. It gets you. Well, all right, guys. Until next time, as I said, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.